So Saul is a member of the provincial parliament for Kiiwetinoong riding is the official opposition critic for Indigenous and treaty relations. He was elected to the Legislative Assembly of Ontario in 2018 and is the first MPP to be elected for this riding. And it's a huge riding. I don't know if you guys have seen the map, but the Northern Ontario riding, this riding is huge. Um, the Kiiwetinoong riding, Kiiwetinoong riding was created prior to the Ontario election in 2017, and the population is 68% Indigenous, um, making it the only riding in Ontario with a majority Indigenous population. So there's a very large Indigenous population that he's serving. Saul is a member of Kingfisher Lake First Nation and is a resident of Sioux Lookout. His first language is OG Cree, and he is a strong advocate for Indigenous language protection, equity in healthcare and education, and treaty rights. So, Saul, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule for joining us. I know that we're all looking forward to hearing from you and just would like to know what's happening in your territory over there. So I'll let you take it over and then we'll have take a couple of questions after.
Okay. Miigwech, Jesse, Chakanakwa Jiminawa. I say hello to everyone. Miigwech, Leo, and Priscilla, for the stories. Miigwech for the drama as well and the song. I think it started us off in a very good place as First Nations people, Indigenous people. Yeah, it's in our language, my Woodland Cree, OG Cree, and Snabemwin. Again, she mentioned that's my first language. I remember learning my English in the early grades. Bonjour, Wajie, hello. Again, miigwech to Jesse for the invitation, but also others from the keepers of the water. It is so important. I know Jesse spoke about that. That I'm going to be sharing some of the barriers, the challenges, and that we face in Northern Ontario as First Nations. But not only that, she mentioned I'm a politician, and it's not something I planned on. It just kind of happened in 2018, and and that it's just being a member of provincial parliament, being an MLA. I know there's different names, and there's 124 of us in Ontario, and there's 15 million people in Ontario, and there's 124 of us that do the work and doing legislation, making laws, and sometimes Indigenous issues fall in the back burner of these issues that we face. And I experience as an MPP, and not only that, but my previous work, has shown me how governments continue to fail as far as this issue of water goes, and how it is far-reaching, and in its impacts as First Nations across not just Northern Ontario but across Canada. But I think it's also important to note that in spite of all this, I see Indigenous people, I see First Nations managing the crisis with such hope, with such resiliency that and with a clear focus on uplifting themselves, ourselves, And I think this is this is one of the, this type of gathering. I know that Jessie, when during her introduction, again, that's my name is Saul Mamakwa. Mamakwa somehow changed to uh, our original name was Memegwese, the rock people, and somehow it turned into Mamakwa, which is also butterfly. It means in our language Memegwe. And I come from a flying community of Kingfisher Lake. There's only about, I don't know, 600 people there, 700 people. And it's all part of that treaty number 9. And as Jesse mentioned, I was elected in June 2018. Before I got elected, I did some work in education in my home community as a director of education. And then I eventually moved on to being a health director for a tribal council, and then eventually I did some work with as a health advisor at the Snabeski Nation, which represents 49 First Nations in Northern Ontario. And health has always been my focus. I don't know why, but my mom was a CHR in the community, community health representative. That's way before we had nurses or doctors in the community. So, and I think I don't know. It's just it was just an interesting path. Like I never chose my path. It just kind of directed me this way. But a little bit about the riding of Kiwetinoong. There's again 68% of the riding is constituent is First Nations, Indigenous people. We have the Crees by the Hudson's Bay, and then we have the OG Crees, which is the Woodland Cree, and then also the Ojibways. So I have 3 languages, different language dialects that I visit. Kiwetinoong means north in our language, and then Anishinaabe, and it's about 294 square kilometers. And I have 24 flying communities that I have to visit. Like I have to get on a plane to get to them. So we have about 33,000 people in that riding. And as an MPP, I try and speak directly about when the legislature, like I'm in Toronto today. This is my office. Like you see Water is Life. That's from the kids from Niskandaga. They made it for me. I have a whole bunch. And also, the flag that was given to me as well. The 215 that were found. So I am able to speak at this place, the legislature in Ontario. That's where I am now. Like that, they actually just finished a session now. I was just watching it on TV. And it's like I'm able to bring these stories, truth-telling stories about what's going on in our communities, that affect on-reserve, off-reserve residents in our communities, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous, like I speak of, because I represent non-Indigenous people too. And I know some of these issues are very, some infrastructure issues such as housing, clean drinking water, sewage, air quality, education, healthcare, mental health, policing, homelessness, emergency management, and reconciliation, treaties, culture, language, heritage, ways of life, natural resources. It's just so but we have to understand these issues are interrelated. Like we know as basic, we know that something as basic as not having clean drinking water has an impact on the social determinants of health. And I see it. I live it. Our people live it. And when we talk about water in the riding of Kiiwetinoong and Northern Ontario and these flying First Nations, the lack of access to clean drinking water, for First Nations in my area I represent, but also across Canada and also in Ontario, is a profound crisis. Sometimes sometimes it's like the other Canada. Sometimes it feels like the other Ontario. But I can say it. I say it in the house. I say it in there. It's the other Canada. It's the other Ontario because they treat us differently because of who we are, where we are. And I'm talking about jurisdiction because any on reserve funding program services is federal responsibility. And these guys over here in Ontario, the province, uses jurisdiction as a way to, as if that's not their, they just wash their hands, that's not their problem. Like, I mean, today in Ontario, there's 143, I think, First Nations in Ontario. And, there's 22 First Nations that are on long-term boyo advisory. Long-term means anything more than 1 year. And then there's 31 long-term boyo advisories across Canada. 14 of those are in my riding of Kiiwetinoong. And, it's crazy. There's a First Nation called the Yabmatung. They've had theirs for 20 years. Muskrat Dam, 18 years. The Skandaga, 26 years. Sandy Lake, 19 years. But we have to understand too, there's also the First Nations that have short-term boil water advisories, which is less than a year, right? When I share these numbers, these are just numbers. But as an MPP, as a politician for the riding of Kiiwetinoong, I am, I'm certainly privileged to be, and an honor to represent people from the best part of Ontario. We are so rich, not only in the lands, the resources that we have in our traditional territories, in our treaty territories, but also in our way of life, of who we are. I think what you see here, what you see here today, all of us listening together, it's about nationhood. It's about coming together. It's about, the more oppressed we are, the stronger we become as nations. And I think that we cannot just deal with the program services, the funding that we see, because those programs and services perpetuate the oppression, the colonialism, the crisis in our communities. But we need to be able to talk about nationhood. We need to be able to talk about treaties. We need to be able to talk about sovereignty. But at that time we are in a place where families in these many places that, where they cannot access safe, clean drinking water in their homes, it's a crime. Can you imagine, being a young person who has never ever known what it's like to drink water from the tap? For the riding that I represent, the First Nations I represent in the North, example is Niskandaga. This is the reality. I also imagine, imagine living with bath water that could make your little one sick, or the tap water isn't safe enough to use to make dinner for your family. In many places across Kiiwetinoong and in First Nations across Ontario and Canada, this is the reality. water is so important. Water is so critical. Access to clean drinking water is such a basic human right, right? But we're treated differently. You know, we should not be having two Ontarios. We should not be having two Canadas, where one where clean water is guaranteed, and the other where people are forced to live without. I believe access to safe drinking water has been an issue for First Nations as long as there had been running water. When I lived in my home community, I got running water in I think it was 1994. And I remember when the systems were infrastructure systems were uh, set up. In some places they weren't set up properly, or whatever the issues, right? Whatever the issues were. I know I used to say that, these programs and services continue to be underfunded chronically, but we have to know that it is all strategic. The continued underfunding is all strategic. Like that's how, like I see it happen here in the house, where like it's not broken. These systems are not broken. They're working exactly the way they're designed to, which is to take away the rights of our people to the lands and the resources that are there. And I know that as a provincial member, I struggle with being a provincial member, because this government uses jurisdiction of the excuse of jurisdiction not to do anything, the excuse to be complacent, not to do anything on reserve, because they're the province. They say that's federal responsibility. Sometimes I call it, that they continue to play jurisdictional ping pong on the health, on the lives of Indigenous people. And when they do that, there is um, unnecessary deaths, unnecessary suffering, needless deaths that happen because of that. And when they play that jurisdictional ping pong, it is exactly what it is. It is structural racism. I don't know if I should call it structural racism. It's racism, period. And all levels of government have not adequately addressed these issues, because First Nations in where I come from continue to live without access to clean drinking water year after year. We have to be able to address the inequities by making sure, you know, making sure people who live and work in First Nations have the same access to safe, clean drinking water as everyone else, whether you're with whatever province you're at, whatever, wherever in Canada that you live. But can you imagine if, if we had to say that the water in Toronto, the water in Calgary, the water in Vancouver, the water in Ottawa was not consistent with the provincial standards? They they would take, they wouldn't allow that to happen. It's just such a, the systems that are there is just such a complete failure to uphold one of those basic human rights for anybody living in Ontario. Never mind Ontario, in Canada as well. Treating people who live and work on First Nations as second-class people, second-class citizens. is unacceptable in this day and age. It's 2021, for Christ's sake, you know? Yeah, I just get frustrated. Yeah, so like in Ontario, the standard of water says that we should expect water with a level of risk so small that a reasonable and informed person would feel safe drinking the water. Not in our First Nations. I can tell you that no one in Canada. I mean, I can tell you that no one in in the Skandiga First Nation feels safe drinking water from the tap. I'm going to tell you a story. I think it was last year, last fall, uh, around the end of October. Niskana got evacuated because they had no running water and there was an oily sheen within the water treatment plant. I went there, I think, maybe 2 or 3 times during that crisis, and they were evacuated 61 days. And so anyway, I remember going to this rally with youth. They had a youth rally. There was about maybe, I don't know, 20 of them, 25 of them. Children like 8 to about 13 years old. I saw them cry. I saw them emotional. And I couldn't, it was hard, eh? And I remember seeing them, and they wanted two things. One, they wanted to go home. Two, they wanted clean drinking water. That's all they asked for. And I think one of the things that happened was that I remember sharing on social media, what was happening. I remember that, and I remember people messaging me that I'm doing a good job in sharing that, right? Elevating the profile of the issue, whatnot. And there were some people that reached out to me that work for First Nation organizations and Indigenous organizations, and and they told me, like we cannot really say anything. So we cannot bite the hand that feeds us, type of thing. I kind of thought, oh, what? So anyway, and it kind of like, like, are you worried about your programs, your position, your funding, and then you rather see our people, kids suffer. So that's how oppression works. That's how colonialism works. And it's when we take drinking water, you know, like, I mean, today, like, I'm just having water, but I'm just so privileged to be able to do that. And I remember asking the chief that one time we went to Niskandaga, and then when they were evacuated, there were about, I think, close to 300 of them that were staying in a hotel, and I constantly checked up on them, right? And I remember asking him, how many of those people that are evacuated, those 300 people, how many do you think they're drinking from the tap water? No hesitation. He says to me, zero. Everybody is so conditioned to drink from a bottled water. So, um, and I think it's, like the impact that it has on the mental health, on the psyche of those communities that do not have water, access to clean drinking water. It's just so important that we continue, that we can do better. I'm so encouraged to be able to see the people that are here. It gives me hope as well to be able to talk to people. I talk to lots of people. I do a lot of these things. Whether it's elementary students, whether it's, high school students, college students, university students, and just to, my thoughts, share my thoughts, share my feelings. It always gives me hope. So, and I think when I'm here, I think I get to see oppression. I get to see colonialism in action. And, we know that there is very extensive evidence in documenting the historical and the ongoing impacts of colonization, forced placement of indigenous children in residential schools in the 19th century and 20th century, removal of our ancestors, our indigenous children from their families. You know, we call it 60 scoop, and then also forced relocation of communities of nations. And I think sometimes we tend to normalize it on the impacts that we see on a daily basis, because when the status quo can be construed as normal and acceptable in our communities, and we cannot be able to be in that place. I know as Anishinaabe people, as First Nations people, as Indigenous people, we know the effects of colonization, of racism, of oppression. They were used, or they are being used as weapons, used against us to make us to where we are today, to be impoverished and remove us from our lands. But also with that oppression, I said earlier, we become stronger as nations, as a nation. Because I see it today that they have not succeeded. They will not succeed, because we've been here for thousands of years. We will continue to be here. We will be here. That is why I continue to, advocate, advocate strongly for the changes within the systems that are not working within our nations. I'm always a believer of transformative change. Systemic change is one piece of the whole puzzle of what is needed to be able to move away from the colonial, oppressive, and racist policies and programs to a self-determined, nation-based approach. Our historic treaty relations require the governments of the day to step up. Here in Ontario, the government of Ontario and Canada alike must respect their words to us and honor the treaties, and so we can all benefit and prosper as we share the land. And I'm always hopeful. I'm always very hopeful for change. I believe in change. And I think I said it a number of times. With everyone that's here, I see you. I don't know where everybody's from, but I see you. We are together. We are in this together. We are here for change. And so certainly I try and do my social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I even have a TikTok account. And it's Saul Mamakwa. And then, so if you want to follow me, it's, I try to share those truth-telling stories. I'm a believer of truth-telling stories because these stories can actually, change public policy within the systems that are there. So I think that's about all I had there, Jesse, and be great for listening.